Hi, I'm Ann Parker. I'm a past national president. I'm going to go over tonight with you the financial policies. I would like you, while you're viewing this video, to have a copy of the 2021 financial policies in front of you. If you're viewing this after National Convention, you'd have the 22-23 financial policies. These are available on our website. And then once you complete the training, then I'd ask you to go and read them for yourselves. These financial policies can be adopted every year at convention with changes that are proposed by the Finance Committee. It takes a 2/3 majority to approve any changes that are made. Generally, there are changes every year as our organization evolves. Your chapter can have its own set of standing rules which would cover financial policies, but those standing rules cannot be in conflict with national. You will see as we go through these, the different types of procedures that are in these financial policies that are what I call non-negotiable. This is how it is. So we'll start off with 1.0. On the national level, there is a finance committee. As your chapter grows, you may have a finance committee. Their job would be to take care of bringing an annual budget to the membership to approve. Remember, all budgets for chapters and at the national level are approved by the membership. You could have email voting on the national level and at the chapter level for an expenditure not to exceed $250. The motion must be made by a member, seconded by another member of the board, and must have a quorum of approval votes. It can be done using the reply all feature. However, these email votes will need to be ratified at your next regularly scheduled meeting. 1.2 says that detailed financial reports will be submitted to the general membership on a quarterly basis. For all levels of the organizations, these reports need to show where the funds came from and where the funds are spent and why. I would challenge you to make these reports to your membership every meeting. Your members will stay more involved if they are allowed to see very frequently the money coming in and where it went. 1.3. We ask all chapters to use a federally insured bank. You also would want to look for a bank that uses online banking and also bill pay. We'll talk about these particular items in a little bit. Many banks now offer online deposits, and with the times we've been in COVID, this is a particularly good thing to have. 1.4. All checks require 2 signatures. That your checks, once you have them printed, will need to have your chapter, state, and number. For example, my chapter is Florida 10, so our checks say Ocala Blue Star Mothers FL10. The first vice president of your chapter is what we call an emergency signer. Your regularly scheduled signers for checks are your financial secretary and your treasurer. They, the financial secretary and the treasurer, are the only ones that will have the debit cards, not the vice president. Now, you might ask why bill pay was mentioned if you're talking about 2 signatures. Bill pay is used on the national level and can be used by your chapter as well by using the following method. A chapter meeting is held and it is agreed to reimburse a particular member, perhaps for an expense that she has incurred. The treasurer gets a copy of the minutes of the meeting, which should be sent out to all members as soon as they are published by the secretary. The treasurer will review the minutes to see if there are any checks that need to be cut based on expenditures approved by the membership. She will set up that reimbursement in the bill pay of the online banking. She will send the financial secretary an email and state something like this: as approved at our last meeting, I am reimbursing whomever for the postage she expended. Please send me a return email approving this bill to be paid. The financial secretary sends the treasurer back an email stating approved. That email correspondence is filed with the reimbursement request, and that's how online bill pay can be used. 1.5, all deposits for your chapter are made by the financial secretary. All checks for your chapter are initiated by the treasurer. 1.6, if you have expenditures for equipment, they are recorded at cost. Depreciation is calculated using a straight line method with a useful life of between 3 and 10 years. 1.7, no check may be payable to cash. The annual approved budget is the authority for the president to approve payments for services and financial commitments. Funds are dispersed upon proper documentation and receipts. When cash is required at a fundraiser, a check may be issued to a member who will then cash the check for the startup funds for the fundraiser. At the completion of the fundraiser, those funds are returned separately back to the checking account in the same amount. 1.8, as I stated, the treasurer will prepare a check and enter into the accounting system used by your chapter, whether that's QuickBooks, Quicken, or an Excel spreadsheet. She will save either electronically or in a paper file the backup documentation, meaning the bill and the reimbursement request. 1.9, your financial secretary and your treasurer will reconcile the bank statement together. The monthly bank statement, the financial reports, and the reconciliation report should be made available to the membership to view. The financial secretary must make financials available to view by providing the records to be viewed, handing out the copies, or sending by email. In these days of email, sending those records out by email is probably your most expeditious way to do it. 1.10, when a chapter is chartering, the chapter name is approved by the National Executive Board prior to that chapter getting their employer identification number with the IRS. The parent organization, which is Blue Star Mothers National, is the only one that can change information on the IRS. So if your chapter is chartered as Ocala Blue Star Mothers, you can't decide down the road that you're going to be called Blue Star Mothers of Ocala. The name that you chartered with, approved by the NEB, and submitted with your request for an employer identification number is that which your chapter should be known as. 1.11, a chapter is required to obtain a post office box as a permanent non-residential address for correspondence. It says within 1 year of chartering, we are asking our chapters now to get that as a part of chartering. This serves as a permanent address. The only exception to that is if your chapter is meeting at a particular location and they will allow you to get mail there, we will allow you to use that as your permanent address. However, using a PO box is much more expeditious because you have access to that PO box all the time. Whereas if you're using an organization's address, you'd have to find a particular person who gathers the mail to get your mail. The financial secretary should be the one collecting the mail. 1.11.1, the post office box expense should be a permanent part of your chapter's annual budget. 1.11.2, anytime your chapter changes an address, you should, of course, should put in a forwarding address with the post office. and you should update the EIN report on the national website using the chapter profile to log in. You then should notify the IRS using 8822B form of this change. 1.12 and the following points under that have to do with checks that your chapter may have issued that have never been cashed. The procedure goes like this in 1.12.1. 90 days, the treasurer tries to make every attempt to contact the payee. 1.12.2, 180 days, the treasurer makes a final attempt to locate it, the missing uncashed checks, and her communication needs to be documented. 1.12.3, at 200 days outstanding, the funds, if it's on the national level, a local chapter, the funds will revert to the organization, meaning Blue Star Brothers National. If the payee is a vendor, the check will be voided and notice will be given, and the check will be issued to the appropriate state treasurer. And there's a whole procedure to do that you could read there. 2.1 are the accounting procedures. On the national level, the Finance Committee does a proposed annual budget. It is approved by the National Executive Board, and then it goes to the membership at convention. Your chapter should do exactly this. The chapter's budget should be prepared and approved in September of each year. If you have a finance committee, they can put it together. It then goes to the chapter executive board, which are your officers. And then once they approve it, it goes to the chapter. Once again, the chapter budget is approved by your membership at every level of the organization. 2.2, general financial accounting. The IRS has all expenses categorized as program, meaning what we do to support our mission, our veterans, our active duty military, and the families of our fallen. Management, meaning things like stamps and envelopes, and fundraising, just what it says. 2.2.1, our accounting records are kept on accrual basis. Accounting methods that record revenues and expenses when they are incurred, regardless when the cash is exchanged. So you write a check in September for an expense that was incurred in September. If it is cashed by the vendor in October, it's still recorded in in September, because it is the prior month, when the expense was incurred, not when the check was cashed. 2.3, let's talk about restricted funds, unrestricted funds. If I want to give your chapter a donation, I can put a letter attached to the check. I can put a Post-it note. I can put it in the memo section, exactly how I want that to be used. For example, I could send your chapter a check and say it must be used totally for shipping boxes. Well, you're not shipping boxes. What are you going to do with that money? You have two options. You must hold it till you're able to ship boxes using that example. Or secondly, you can come back to me as the donor and say, we are just not able to find names to ship boxes. Could we use that money to buy socks at the VA? If I, as the donor, makes that distinction, I unrestrict those funds. But if I'm adamant that my money must be used for boxes, then you must hold that in your checking account unused until you're able to use it. 2.4 is the chapter grant. Each year on the national level, we are able to award $250 grants to 10 chapters, existing chapters. Chapter grant can be gotten by a chapter every 2 years for a project. They apply for the grant, it's approved, they are dispersed the money, and then they furnish a report back to the Finance Committee of how those funds were used. In addition, 10 new chapters that are chartered every year can get a $250 grant upon completion of their chartering and application. This helps the new chapter get started with things like PO boxes and maybe some expenses like business cards that helps them get going. 3.0, when you go to your bank to open your checking account, they may ask you if you'd like a credit card. Credit cards are not allowed for Blue Star Mother chapters. Only a debit card may be used. The treasurer and the financial secretary, as I mentioned, are the sole holders of that. That's in 3.1.2. 3.1.3 talks about on the national level the different things that the debit card can be used for. 3.14 talks about prior approval on the national level for making airline reservations. 3.15 talks about rental cars. 3.16, the debit card is to meet all required transparency criteria, limited to things like on the national level, online store supplies, yearbook deposits, and other approved expenses that you would have on the chapter level. There are certain pre-approved things on the national level under 3.17. You can certainly read that. 3.1.8 talks about refunds issued by the national. 3.2 talks about reimbursement for expenses of the national board, and the committee chairman is authorized by our budget. 3.21 talks about our national president's reimbursements. 3.22 talks about different officers. 3.2.3 talks about chaplains, VAVS reps, convention chairs, finance chairs, Washington, D.C. representatives. All of those are reimbursables. 3.24 talks about the reimbursement for the national VAVS rep to attend the Voluntary Service Council. 3.25 talks about our patriotic instructor. 3.26 talks about any other expenses that are pre-approved by the NEB. And this goes on to talk about other things that are not reimbursable. In 3.4, I'd like you to look there because these things do apply to your chapter. Travel meals are not authorized. Internet fees are not authorized. Convention registration fees on the chapter, they may pay for their delegate. Convention meal tickets, unless the meals are included in the convention agenda, and travel insurance. Those are not allowed on the national level, and they are not allowed on the chapter level. Now, if you have a member that wants to come to an event, 3.5 talks about an accountable plan for reimbursable travel expenses. This would be if your chapter had the money for that. Perhaps your president's going to load everyone in her car and take them to the VA to play bingo. If your chapter has the money and it's voted by your membership, she could be reimbursed. But very carefully look at 3.51. The reimbursement is at the charitable rate of 14 cents a mile and not at the IRS per diem rate. At any rate, all of this has to be documented. You'll find a reimbursement form on the national website. If someone is taking a car as opposed to flying, maybe they don't fly because of personal reasons, there is a particular method that's outlined that you have to Google the destination using something like Google Maps at the 14 cents a mile, and the person is reimbursed that, or the airfare, whichever is the best method to use for the organization. All reimbursements need to be turned in within 60 days. You don't need to hold your receipts for a whole year. 3.52, if you're traveling by air or other commercial, reimbursements not to exceed the amount that would have been paid by a common carrier within 21 days advance purchase. You can't wait till the day before convention to book your flight and then expect to be reimbursed. You need to at least do it 21 days in advance. 4.1 talks about our national convention. 4.11 says that our national president chooses the site. She'll make 4.12, she'll make arrangements for all expenses to be paid. 4.13 1.3, the national president shall receive accommodation for up to 6 nights at convention and complimentary luncheon and banquet tickets for herself and 2 guests. 4.14 talks about the national elected officers, the National Finance Committee Chair, the National Chaplain, the National Convention Chair, the Bylaws Committee Chair, and the National Parliamentarian. They all will get 6 nights lodging. 4.15, complimentary lunch and banquet tickets are extended to all convention speakers. Meal tickets for guests of visiting dignitaries are not complimentary, only the guest itself. 4.16 talks about a vendor table fee for chapters that would like to sell things at the National Convention for their own fundraising proceeds. 4.17 talks about net proceeds from the convention silent auction. They're to be rolled over into the next year's convention budget. Convention chapter delegates in 4.18. The chapter may pay their convention registration fees, any meals offered as part of the registration fee, associated travel expense to and from convention site, and lodging at the convention site, not to exceed 6 nights for up to 2 persons a room. 4.12 talks about the procedures that are used for Veterans Day and for Memorial Day when our national president goes and represents us. The main thing I want you to hear out of all of this that we're talking about expenses is that it should not be any chapter expense that benefits only one person. This is an IRS rule. If you have any questions about that, they may be directed to Finance Chair at bluestarmothers.us. Our congressional charter does not allow for us to send flowers to a member, to write a check for a particular serviceman or woman's expenses. We may donate to like an American Legion that we know helps service members, but we can't designate who it goes to. 4.3 talks about our mid-year meeting, which the NEB has been doing for the last few years and found it to be very helpful. 5.0 talks about our current auxiliaries. Right now, there are Big Dipper and the Gavel Club. The Gavel Club being past national presidents, and Big Dipper, where you could pay $10 a year membership fee, and they provide educational grants, not scholarships, but educational grants. And these auxiliaries must report their activities and their finances just like your chapters do in compliance. 6.0, the convention delegates may approve a donation of up to 30% of the national annual net income to up to 3 501c3 organizations. These are chosen at National Convention by the convention body. And 6.2, the National BSMA may match up to 100% of the VAVS, which is Veterans Affairs, voluntary service donations received from chapters contingent on availability of funds. I've now reviewed the financial policies for you. Again, I'd like you to read them over, and if you have any questions, you can certainly contact our finance chair at bluestarmothers.us. Thank you for your time and attention.